Now, what we've seen in the past 21 days is brutal crackdowns of the Georgian people as they have aspired to show their willingness to continue their journey to be part of Europe. Now, one woman who has stood the course, who very much has been and still continues to be president of Georgia, Ms. Salome Zurabishvili, has acted on their behalf, and she's here now speaking to TVP World about the future of Georgia and how that relationship impacts not just the region, but Europe as a whole. Madam President, thank you so much for joining us. I want to just start with a quote from Kaya Kallas, the new High Rep. Now, she said some time ago, democratic backsliding will have direct consequences. But if we look at what the EU has done so far, would you say that that's satisfactory in your mind?
Well, it's certainly in line with what we know of how democracies react to autocracies and how Europe reacts to Russia. It's very difficult for 27 countries together to resort to the serious measures that need consensus. But what we would expect more, we have had a lot of moral support, political support from almost all the partners, except one or two. But for the rest, very strong support from the Baltic states, from Poland, from Germany, from the French president that had something that was very rare, this type of direct allocation to the population. So on that side, I can say that there was an adequate reaction from the European Union. I think that they are in the process of measuring what that means. And you were saying, well, democratic backsliding. It's not democratic backsliding. It's much more than that. It's really the imposition of a Russian model in Georgia, which was one of the old and strongest democratic models in the region. That means that Russia is testing a new ground, which is not military intervention, which has not given them the results that they were expecting very clearly, whether it's in Ukraine or whether it's in Syria. They're testing something new, which is using the elections as an instrument which allows them to consolidate their proxies and in that way take away a country that is striving for democracy and towards Europe, towards its own zone of influence. And that is what the Europeans should be very concerned, because this instrument of electoral war is something that has been used and tested not only in Georgia, without much reaction yet on the elections themselves, where everybody should have said that is intolerable. And we've seen after that in Romania. And then suddenly more reaction. And then people remembered that Moldova had almost fallen for the same type of attacks, but was saved by its diaspora. So then it's clear that it's a strategy, that it's not just one country or the other, that it's not something that translates or division of Georgia towards its European future. Georgia remains united. The 80% of the population that want Europe have not gone anywhere, and they are on the streets. So what happened? Clearly that's a demonstration that the elections were very much stolen, and it's a demonstration that the ruling party manages to intimidate, to put under control a small but a part of the population, and not a small, a very big part of the institutions. And that's what has been to be confronted directly, understood and confronted.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said that this is a kind of a strategy by the Kremlin. You spoke here in the parliament addressing MEPs about this Russian direction of the Georgian Dream Party. But we've come to a very complicated situation. At the same time, you said these elections should have been condemned. They were condemned by the European Parliament in its resolution, but not across the board from member states. You had Viktor Orban of Hungary travel to Tbilisi. You've had this also controversial handshake between the EU ambassador also in Tbilisi with your foreign minister.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it on the same level. The Hungarian visit was deliberately a visit to recognize the elections that nobody else has done until now, not the United States, not any of the other European countries. And it was agreed in advance between the ruling party and the leadership of Hungary. The handshake, which I protested very vehemently, was more a manifestation of this propaganda manipulation of anything that they can use to manipulate. So they will organize things like that. They might be organizing it right now for the Secretary General of the Council of Europe that is visiting and is not well prepared for the type of really Soviet Russian-like propaganda, which uses everything to project a different reality.
Also on the point, in terms of your role now as president, you've been, by the Georgian regime, replaced by someone else, someone more loyal to the party there. There was only one person.
More loyal is not.
Well, in terms of a candidate that they seem to favor, Mr. Zurabichvili. So what does that mean now for your role? How do we view this person now in Tbilisi? What is your role now in the future? What are your next steps?
I think that with the lack of effective instruments that, as you mentioned, the European Union has to deal with that type of it's not a problem, it's more than a problem. It's clear that the minimum what they can do is not recognize a president that is clearly designated. There was one name on one list that was read by everyone, by a parliament that is not legitimate because it has violated a number of constitutional requirements and following elections that were stolen. So I understand that there might be moments when, if it is to put pressure, when our European partners will have to talk to someone in order to transmit the very harsh messages, which is the least they can do if there is nothing else they can do. But he doesn't belong in that category. He will be used only for that, to counter me in the way to take out the people's legitimacy which I'm carrying, the state continuity, and to be, at this stage, the only left independent institution. So if they can kill that by having and projecting this new president or so-called president, then they will achieve that. So I think that the policy of the European partners has to be clear about their approach to this situation.
Mm-hmm. And also, we're sitting here in Strasbourg at the moment. We know that there's a large diaspora community of Georgians here. You mentioned that also in your speech. There's clearly those people that would support you, not just in Georgia, but also across Europe and the world. But what of your future now? Will you be returning to Georgia? I
have not left Georgia. I came for 24 hours. There is no question about leaving Georgia. I'm there. And as I mentioned, I do not want, I see some not calls, but suggestions that I would become, I don't know, Tikhanovskaya or the Venezuelan president, which they recognize once he's in exile. And I heard that today probably there is a Sakharov Prize also. I do not want that once everything is finished. What is the use of being supported? I need to be supported now in my country, together with my population.
Mm-hmm. But you are someone who has stood the ground very much for your people, that European path. How does that impact you emotionally? Are you afraid when you return to Tbilisi? Do you fear for yourself or for your people?
Everybody, I think, to some extent fears something because we are really in a police state, a criminal state, and Russian-type state. So how can you say that you do not fear anything? But then the stake is so high, it's deciding really for the future of this country, for the independence of this country, and my grandparents and parents left this country because of the Russian occupation. I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's some serious sanctions that could be employed. I mean, the United States Treasury with OFAC, for instance, which would significantly impact, I mean, if we're looking at potentially oligarchs or other Georgian individuals, we haven't seen that kind of sanctions package. We haven't seen that on the European level either. The question is, would that be enough to dissuade Georgian Dream to change its course?
Well, nobody knows what would be enough to dissuade them, because it depends on the level to which they are under strict control by Russia. What I've described is that they are acting and behaving and creating a state that is on the Russian model, but nobody can say how much they are completely in the hands of Moscow. So that is something that has to be tested by our partners, and the best way to test it is really to see, and that's more of the American sanctions, who can reach to the elite that is around Mr. Ivanishvili. But that will depend on the new administration, probably. And the new administration, I think, should look at Georgia as a country where they do not want to have a new crisis, where they do not want to have a government that is going to serve the interests not only of Russia, but of Iran, of Syria's old regime, or some terrorists with whom the Prime Minister has been willingly taking pictures and meeting with. So the stake there too is to know whether the United States want to have stability, wants to have security in the Black Sea, and across the Caucasus, which is in their hands.
Mm-hmm. And also an enduring message that you have to the European Union, to leaders across the bloc of your presence here. What would you like Europe and the world to do next for Georgia?
Well, support the Georgian population and help us to get the only way out, that is a peaceful way out of this situation, elections, free and fair elections, that will return Georgia on its European path. It's not a revolution. Georgian Dream will probably stay to the extent and with the percentage that it deserves really in the population. And then we can have a coalition government. That's the normal path for normal Georgia, normal European Georgia.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Madam President, so much for your time. And thank you for watching. That was Sasha Farbach speaking to Georgia's President Zurabishvili here at the European Parliament for TVP World.